everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Michelle, and today we are going to be doing my fifth video of the whole art supply series. But this video is just an art video, and we're going to be talking about some of my watercolor art pieces. But before we get into this video, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell and that like button, and now we can get into this video. Okay guys, so here we are, and I have three of my paintings that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today, and this is the first one, and this is the second one, and this is the third one. And let's start by talking about the first one. So the first one, as you can see, there is a lot of water splotches. And something that's very important to remember when you're doing watercolor is that when you're dipping your paintbrush in the paint, you should have more water than you do paint, if that makes sense. Because that's the whole point of watercolor, to be spreading around the paint. And as you can see, that's kind of what happened here. That's why you can see a lot of water splotches. And believe it or not, this was actually my first watercolor painting ever. And I still have it to this day, and I'm really proud of it. So that's kind of what I have to say. As you can see, the colors really blend in well together, and that's kind of what's very nice about watercolor, is that the colors will blend together very nicely, all because of the water. So water is of course very important in watercolor. Now let's talk a little more on the second one. I might come back to the first one. So here's the second one, and as you can see, there are a lot of different colors happening here, kind of like a little neutral, settling around the grays and browns a little. And what I have to say for this one is that it was honestly really fun. In some areas are a little more dry than I would have expected them to be, like around right here. Maybe that could have used a little more water. As you can see, there's kind of like a little difference between these two. But I mean, apart from that, you just have to remember to make sure that you have enough water and that it's not too dry. What happens is that when you don't take enough water, you'll kind of notice when you're putting the paintbrush on your watercolor paper. And by the way, I'll come back to watercolor paper in a little bit. When you put your paintbrush on your watercolor paper, it'll come up like a little chalky, and it'll also be very, very dry, and the color will be really bright. And that consistency is not good, and it'll honestly piss you off a lot. It happened to me a lot, and I had to stop and correct myself after realizing my mistake. And it's always important to remember, have more water than color in your paintbrush. As for paintbrushes, I use a bunch of paintbrushes. I don't know if you guys remember these paintbrushes from that video that I made. But honestly, there's just a variety of them, and you can get them at Michael's for like $5 to $10. I'm not really sure what the exact price would be, but I will leave a link down below in the description box if you want to get some paintbrushes from Amazon. And honestly, I would just say that the usual size of a paintbrush would kind of be like this one. It's kind of like a round brush. It's not exactly a flat brush like this one. But it honestly depends on what you're doing. I'll usually be using this paintbrush though. So that's what I have to say about paintbrushes. But as for watercolor paper, make sure that you are using watercolor paper, especially if you are not that experienced with this media. Because what happens is if you use mixed media paper, it'll like soak in really easily, especially if you're using too much water. So watercolor is a very unforgiving media. If you make a mistake, you make a mistake. There's not really any going back. If I do make an error and I absolutely hate the painting, what I will do is I'll take that paper, and again, making sure that it's watercolor paper, and I'll just take it to the kitchen sink, and I'll turn on the faucet and just wash all of the color out, and it actually works. You just have to set the paper out to dry for a little, and after that you'll be set. And if you're seeing like some sort of lump in your paper, like it's kind of like bumpy, then you know that you're using a little bit too much water. It always happens to me, and it is still happening to me because I'm not that experienced with this media. I know the basics though, and I know that it's very fun. You just have to know how to use it properly. So that's kind of what I have to say about this one. I used a flat brush to do these. Mainly because filling in these little spaces would be kind of hard to do with a round brush. Round brush is preferably more for like detail and landscapes. And that leaves me to my third and final painting here. And here it is. And as you can see, there's a woman, and something that I really like about this painting is the dress itself. For this one in particular, I did not use that small flat brush. I used this one right here. This one is like really good for things like this. You can kind of like imagine me just pulling down the paintbrush. Something that's really important when you're doing like not just watercolor but any sort of paint or media, you want to make sure that you are that you're trying your best to get that color down in one stroke as far as possible. See, if I had stopped in the middle right around here, it would not have been looking very pretty right now, and the strokes wouldn't have come together. Even if it is watercolor, there would still be some unevenness and maybe even a little bit of difference in color. But just talking a little bit about the painting itself, my idea for this one was that the woman was looking on the brighter side of things, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but on this side of the paper you can kind of see like the brighter colors, the very happy, bright, and enthusiastic colors. And over here are kind of like the dark, dramatic colors. They're not very dark, but as you can see, they're very dramatic. They're a much darker tone than these. And the whole message is that you should always look at the brighter things, and as you can see, there are more brighter things in this case than darker things, and you should always be focusing on the brighter things in life, because focusing on the dark things will do you no good. So that was the whole idea of this painting. I just thought I'd share that with you guys since I was feeling a little inspirational when making this painting. Something else that I wanted to mention was that when you are doing watercolor, what will happen is that you'll make this specific color and you'll really like it. You love the tone of it, but here's the thing, you're doing watercolor. And it's really easy to lose that tone, especially when you're taking a lot of water. So when you just be mindful of that when you have like your cup of water and you're dipping your paintbrush in, and then you have that beautiful, stunning, very nice color in front of you, and you dip your paintbrush in, it might be lighter than expected to, so maybe make like a darker variant of that color that you created. And also, again, with the whole one stroke thing, make sure that you try and cover as much length as you can, because what will happen is that your paintbrush will become dry, and you have to dip the paintbrush in some water, and all of a sudden that color will become lighter, and you'll be like, I spent all of this time, and now it's like this. So just be mindful of that. And the last thing that I wanted to go over is what types of watercolors should I buy? Should I buy a palette? Should I buy the tubes? Because there are so many types of watercolors that you could buy that come in many different types of packaging. I have this one in particular, and there are both pros and cons to having these. The pros for this one is, as you can see, it's a little messy, but don't mind that. As you can see, there's like this little clear palette up here, kind of like a palette, and you can like mix your colors there. And that comes in really handy, especially if you don't want to buy a bunch of those extra empty palettes where you can just mix your colors. This comes in really handy so that you can just mix your colors and have your colors right here as well. However, the cons to this is that when you run out of one color, sorry, oh my god, I just closed this. When you run out of one color, like for example, I'm running out of white, and obviously white is one of those colors that runs out pretty quickly. So if anything, if you want to go with a palette like this, I would just recommend that you buy a huge tube of titanium white. I'm literally already freaking out with these palettes because the white is not exactly a titanium white. It's kind of like an off-white, and it'll really disturb you when you want to like fix some fine edges. Like, for example, here it is. I found it. Okay, so as you can see, some of the edges in this painting aren't going to be very pretty. So what happens when I want to fix those edges and I'm using one of those palettes? Well, oops, it's not going to work. Some of the places where you can see the off-white is right here. And obviously that's not exactly a white that I would really want. It's not going to fix the edges. It's not going to mix in with the background. And honestly, I don't even know if I would call it a white. It's really a really light gray. And to be honest, that's kind of the big downside to using these types of palettes, which is why I really do like the tubes, because you can just buy a big tube of titanium white and you can use that. And also, of course, if you run out of paint in one of the tubes, you can always just go to the store and replace it. So that's kind of the pros and cons to palettes and tubes. But here's another look at the palette, and yeah. So that's kind of all I have to say about my paintings, but for all I have to say, if you know how to use watercolor, then you'll be great. You just need some inspiration. You just need some watercolor, a watercolor paper, some paintbrushes. That's literally it. And the first couple of times it might be kind of hard because you're like, oh, the paper is lumpy, or oh, there's too many water splotches, or even, oh, I messed up big time. And that's totally okay. Even when I started doing watercolor, I personally didn't enjoy it that much. But after doing it a couple more times, and I hope this video came useful to you guys, and after getting to know how the media works a little more, I was definitely on it, and now I love doing watercolor. And you just need inspiration, and make sure you let that creativity flow through you, through that paintbrush and onto your paper so that you can create your own masterpiece. And of course, I wish you the best on your journey to creating your masterpiece. Sometimes it'll just kick in, and whenever you feel that inspiration, that little burst through you, or that voice through you that tells you, I want to paint today, go paint. Trust me, if you ignore that feeling, it's not going to be back for some time, and honestly, you're kind of going to drift away. So make sure that you are letting that creativity flow through you and onto that paper, because who knows, maybe one day you'll be famous. But that's all I have to say on watercolor. I had a really fun time making this video for you guys. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and that like button. I really hope this video was helpful for you guys. And I post every Sunday, so if you want to check out my page, you can. And make sure you check out my last art video. I loved making this video for you guys so much, and I can't wait to see you guys in my next one. Bye, guys!